Hey folks, how's it going? My name is Rosendo from MLH, and I am here today to introduce some awesome content that we're going to be enjoying collaboratively over the next hour or so. First and foremost, I do want to thank everyone for being here this week and joining us for LHD Build. Sorry if I am cutting off those sweet tunes that were playing in the background and y'all were vibing, but now it's time to vibe to something completely different. So basically coming up next, we have a developer advocate from Linode by the name of Lana Lux. You can actually check out some other content from Lana Lux on Twitch as well. You'll see it there scrolling across the bottom of the screen. In addition to that, you can see some of the other content that Lana produces at youtube.com and that link right there. So if you're referencing this video at a later point in time, make sure you go and check that out. I'll also drop everything in the chat for y'all. So with that being said, I do want to bring Lana onto the stream for you. She'll be talking about some of the awesome things that you could do with Linode and game development. So without further ado, here they are.
Hey, Rosenda, thanks for having me on. Hello, everybody.
No problem. Thanks for being here. And with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and disappear into the background. So just let me know if you need anything. Bye.
All right, thanks. All right, hey guys, how's everyone doing today? Today we're going to be talking about game development, how games are made, and how you can get started if you wanted to give that a try. To give a bit of a background, my name is Lana, and I'm a game developer. I work independently, so I basically make my own games and then put them up for sale on Steam, which you may have used if you like to play games, and sell them on there. And so I do a lot of the different parts that goes into making a game. And we're going to go through all of that in a minute. I also stream on Twitch daily while I'm working. So that's sort of how my daily routine goes. You know, I get up, we start a stream and I work on the game, and it takes a while, but then eventually I do release them, and that's how that goes. I work with Linode as well, sometimes doing tutorial videos for their products like servers for websites or hosting multiplayer games, which is cool because part of game development is research, and I'm making a survival game. So I've been able to try out some of the survival games that you can make servers for on that. All right. So now that you know who I am, we're going to talk about how games are made. So if this is something that's new to you, there are different ways games can be made. So you might be more familiar with some of the big blockbuster type games from what we call AAA studios. And those are the ones that have huge teams, hundreds, if not, thousands of people working on them. They can take anywhere from a few years to 5 to 10 years. They have sometimes hundreds of $1 million in budget, and they can make just as, hundreds of $1 million. They can make so much money. It's a huge industry, and it's always growing. But not all games are made like that. Some games are made from smaller studios where you have maybe less than 100 people. Maybe you have only a small group of people. They can even be made solo, and they can be made as a hobby. So there's different ways you can play games, obviously. You can play them on consoles. You can play them on your computer. You can play them on mobile. And all different size studios can make games for all different platforms. So if you are interested in making games, the first thing I like to recommend is to figure out what would be your dream when it comes to making games. Would you like to make your own game? Would you like to work on your favorite, your favorite IP, would you like to work with your favorite studio or on specifically your favorite game? Or would you like to work with a medium-sized studio where you can work with a group of people and come up with a fun concept and get to try out some of the different roles? Depending what seems the most appealing to you, this can help inform the best way to go about learning. Because the big studios tend to have more specialized roles because there's so many people. So you might do something like rigging characters to prepare them for animation, or you might do something like drawing the concepts for the environment, or you might end up doing like development of the enemy's behavior. There's very specific niche roles when you go into bigger studios. So if that's something you want to do, the best thing you can do to prepare yourself is to figure out what you like doing and really focus in on getting good at that one specific task. If you want to be more diverse in your skill set, you may want to join a medium-sized team or even work alone. And that's where you might have a chance to work on both the development and the art, maybe the design, marketing, story writing. There's so many hats that can be worn in game development. So if you're here in chat, I'd love to hear what is interesting to you in terms of how you would like to make games. And hello to those of you who are joining us today. I see you popping up in chat. Like Free Guy. I haven't seen Free Guy yet, but yes. I can't even comment because I don't know exactly what the game in that movie is about. I'm looking forward to seeing it though. RPGs, fantastic. So What I do is I do it on my own or work with a few people. And we're going to go a little closer into detail on that because that's what I have experience doing. I've been doing this for a number of years now, about 4 years full time. And then I've been doing it as a hobby for a long time. If you guys have ever been interested in making games, I highly recommend giving it a try. Even if you don't know what you'd like to do with it, or maybe you just want to do it for fun and not take it too seriously, just kind of explore it, that is something you can start doing today. There's a lot of tools online available for free for you to get started, which is really exciting because that wasn't always the case. And it used to be really difficult. And some of the skills needed to make the graphics show up on the screen or to simulate physics of the world that you see is quite complex. And today we have engines available that do all of that heavy lifting, so we don't have to do that. And if you're worried about needing to know math or complex physics, a lot of it is taken care of you. So, if you're doing a simple game, you don't need to necessarily be good at those things. If you're doing something more complex, you may eventually want to dig into some of the math behind it, but you don't have to let that intimidate you. The same goes for programming. It's not necessarily math-based, and having a good understanding of math can be helpful, but for basic stuff and getting into it, you don't need to have a background in math or be particularly good in math. So let's look at a few of the engines that are available for you to try. The most common ones that come up frequently are Unity, which is what I use, Unreal Engine, Godot, Game Maker Studio. Those are probably the most popular. I believe they're all free, at least to get started. And they all have their benefits and reasons to pick between them. But at the end of the day, they're all really helpful and they're all a great way to start getting used to making games. Any questions so far? There's so much information I want to share with you that I want to check in, make sure I'm not talking, going on to a new topic before answering any of the ones that you guys have. The third one, Godot. Okay, so Unity, let me go into something a little bit more about each of them. Unity uses something called a component system. So you basically have game objects in your scene, and then those game objects can have like building blocks. Like this one has physics, so now it'll move around and interact. This one has maybe you can also add something to it that will give it navigation. Now it starts moving. It's kind of like you add on these blocks of details or interactions or how it behavior blocks basically. And you can add those to different objects to put together the thing. You can also write your own behaviors through C#, which is the language that Unity uses, that you use to code the stuff in Unity. Though they have recently put out visual scripting, so you don't even need to learn to code if you don't want to, though I think it's one of the funnest parts of game development, and I highly recommend giving it a try because it can be very fun and gives you a really good sense of control over what's happening in the scene. The next one I listed was Unreal Engine. So there's Unreal Engine 4 and Unreal Engine 5. 5 is brand new. It's got some really cool new features. You may have even seen it, even if you're not in game development, because there was there's a Matrix demo that came out through Unreal, and they have a lot of other things that they're very, how do I put it? Like they own Fortnite. They have the Unreal platform that they have games that you can get on it. So that one you may have heard of. It looks really beautiful right off the bat. It's got nice lighting. It has some visual scripting language by default that you need to work with. So what you can do is get used to the blueprints through that, which is what it's called, blueprint system. And then you can use C++ to get more detail and more specifics of that system. Unity, you don't need to use a visual scripting. You can just use code. And C# is a little bit more accessible because you don't have to worry about quite as many things when you're doing C#. Some of it's taken care of for you. C++ is a little more tricky, but you do have the visual scripting to start. So both of them are really great options. And honestly, either one that you decide to go with will be great. Godot, I don't have as much experience with, but it's fully open source, which is really appealing to a lot of people. It's constantly being updated, and it's really coming up to speed with the other two engines. I heard it's good for 2D games, where the other are really good for, well, they're good for both, but I think Unreal is specifically good for 3D. Unity, usually, if you're doing a game in 3D, you will use, actually, I don't know. I'm not sure which 2D and 3D is best, because I work in 3D. But I believe Godot has been really great specifically for 2D games, same with Game Maker Studio. So I hope that covers a little bit about the different engines you can choose between. Yeah, Godot, that's right. Let's learn C#, y'all. C# is fantastic. I really enjoy working in C#. How to start game development as a beginner. So I would recommend taking a look at those. If you're overwhelmed, honestly, just pick one. It's very easy to get stuck in indecision because there's so much to learn about the engines and what their benefits are. But like I said, pick one, get into it, start doing some tutorials, and you will start to become more familiar. And then you can make a better, more informed decision as you start to learn what you like to do, how you like to do it, and what you eventually want to be doing, so that you can pick the best tool for that project. You can download all of these engines for free from their respective websites. One thing about these engines is that it may not be clear if you're just getting started, is that you do not make the assets in them. So if you are really intrigued by the artistic side of game development, you will probably want to learn a different software. While I recommend getting a game engine so you can put your art in there and do cool things with it, make it interactive or view it in different ways, you probably want to make your assets in a different software. If you're specifically focused on making the games, programming, and the art is not as interesting to you, there are free assets available that you can import and work with so that you don't have to make them. You can also work with people, of course. But if you want to do both, or if you are specifically interested in the art side of things, there are lots of tools to get started with that. The biggest, most popular one right now is Blender, which is a free tool. I use Maya, which is, it is a paid tool. Both of them are 3D software tools. There's lots of 2D things like Photoshop, which is not free. But you can find equivalents available. Krita, I think, is one. GIMP is another, where you can make flat images to use in your game and eventually make sprite sheets and animations. But for 3D, you could take a look at Blender is a great option. Maya and 3ds Max are also industry standards that are really powerful tools for making 3D assets. Any questions unanswered so far? Let's see. Are you talking about the Matrix website? No, there's actually, I think it's for console only, but there's a demo that looks like it's a real scene, but it's a video game. It looks so realistic, and you're driving through the city. I haven't tried it myself, but they released it through Unreal Engine as a demo game. Godot uses a language that's similar to Python. Yes, thanks for sharing that, actually. I forgot to mention that. Godot uses a Python-styled language. What prerequisites do I need before getting into game development? Glad you asked. There are no prerequisites. A basic computer, as long as it can run most modern software, you should be able to run most of these engines. Unity is great for this kind of thing because it's relatively lightweight compared to maybe Unreal, Godot as well, Game Maker Studio. And if you're just making a simple game, you don't need a powerful computer. If you're making something that's really graphic intense, you might want something a little more powerful. If you're doing a lot of operations, you might want something more powerful, because running the engine is a little bit more complex than running the game. And if you're waiting a lot while you're working, it can become more tedious and time consuming. So eventually you may want to upgrade, but you can do it basic games with basic hardware and software. You don't need to have any prior knowledge, but you will need to be ready to take on some learning, whether you're doing visual scripting or coding, programming. There will be a learning curve, but honestly, if you start, I think the best way to learn to code is through game development, because you can start to see things immediately. If you want, we can also dig into how to code in C# so you guys can see what it looks like and how quickly you can start seeing results. What prerequisites is what we're answering. So yeah, don't be intimidated. You can honestly start right now. You can go download these engines. You can start digging into them. And there's so many tutorials online, whether it's YouTube, where it's so many freely available content. There's streams of people doing things and answering questions like live, real time. There's, if you are wanting to buy courses through Udemy, they usually go on sale for like $15, and they have a whole course outline teaching you the basics or a specific task on any of these particular topics within the game development process. So don't be shy. Don't feel like you need to wait to do it or have any special skills to do it. You can get into it, and it's a lot of fun. What we'll be doing today? Well, I'm going to go through some of the explanations on how games are made, what goes into it, and we can take a look at Unity and give you some examples of what that looks like. Is Pygame considered an engine? I think it's more a library. Can you clarify? I'm a bit confused. I'm not familiar with Pygame, so I'm afraid I can't clear that up for you, but I'm sure that it can be, they'll give you some of the information on the website, and just because I didn't mention that one or any other ones doesn't mean that there aren't other engines or tools to get you started, but those are just the ones that come up a lot that are common and that there's a lot of resources online for. It's a library. Okay, thank you, Nanny. By the way, Unreal Engine is just a few months ago bought ArtStation, and they made it free forever now. Yeah, so there's a lot of movement happening in the game development industry. As you mentioned, Unreal bought ArtStation. Unity also recently bought Weta, which is the technology that went into the cinematics, like the special effects in Lord of the Rings. So, and that was like over $1 billion. And Blender is getting all kinds of funding to be improved and advanced. All of these tools are just getting better and more powerful and giving more, giving power to the users as well. Like as game developers, they're saving us time. If you've seen some of the demos for Unreal 5 as well, there's a lot of the technical things that you need to do with the art is no longer necessary, which means it can speed up the game making process, not only in making the games, but all the steps that you need to learn. So it's becoming easier and easier. And even from like 10 years ago, there's so many tools to get started. So it's, the sooner you get into it, the more you'll know over time. I know I waited a while before I got into it, thinking it was going to be a big undertaking. And honestly, once I finally sat down and started learning Unity, I realized I could have been making games sooner. I would have been further along, and I could have made so much more if I had just gotten into it sooner. So I am curious if you guys are interested in game development, or if you do game development, can you put a 1 in chat if you do development, a 2 in or are interested in it, a 2 in chat if you're interested or do art, and a 3 in chat if you do any of the other things like music, composition, game design, writing, that kind of thing. You can put multiple. I'd love to see what you guys are interested in, what you guys do, and we can maybe talk more about some of the topics that you guys are more interested in. We have some 1s, lots of people interested in development. That's amazing. We have 3 other parts of the game, but not necessarily art. We have 1, 2, 3, all of it. 1 and 2, very cool. Okay, so there are a lot of different roles within the game development industry that you can take on underneath all of these categories. And I really recommend making a small project once you get the basics down. So if you don't already know C# or C++ or Python, then you might want to go through the tutorials that help you understand programming concepts, specifically using these languages, so that you can understand them and start using those tools to make your game. Once you have a good idea of a few things, the best way to properly understand them is to use them in a project. So if you have the ability to walk around, and you have the ability to show a number on the screen, and you have the ability to interact with a game object, like with a collision, now you have the ability to have a character move around and pick things up and show a number on the screen. So you could go and hide things, and can make a simple, like, go find the objects game. And just putting those pieces together to make your simplest version of a game, because doing that, you think of all the other things that go into it that you might not have thought of, like a title screen. How do you close the game? You don't want to have to do like Control-Delete to close the game. You want to be able to close it naturally with a close button. You might want to change, you want to add sound. You might want to have a volume control. You might want to have a save system. So once you start building the most simplest form of a game, you start to see all these peripheral skills that you want to develop in your game development. And that's a great way to gain excitement and motivation to learn the next step. So let's say you started with that simple game. Now you're like, okay, how do I do audio? Now you can go out and find a way to do audio in games, and you can learn about that skill. And you can start collecting all these different tools so that when you make your game, hopefully you already have a good chunk of them. Hopefully you know how to do all of them, and it's more about putting them together. And as you progress further, then you want to learn more about the best way to put them together and the architecture behind the game, so that it's nice and clean. Your code is easy to work with. You know where to find everything. Everything's nice in managers and easy to find them and use them and add and remove and fix bugs. So there's plenty to learn, but you can still do some cool stuff right from the beginning. One other thing that is important to bring up is that if you are using Unity, I'm not sure about the others, but if you're using Unity, another thing you'll want is either an IDE, which is an integrated development environment. It's a software that you code in, or a text editor, which is like a simplified version of that, which if you guys ever use Notepad, you know what a text editor is. And an IDE basically has some more built-in tools to help you find bugs without having to compile first, which is like building the code to check it over and get it ready. If you are typing something, it can auto-complete and give you suggestions so that you don't have to remember what you called something, or if you're still getting familiar with some of the way things are written in that language, it will help remind you of how to complete the coding sentence. So an IDE is really helpful. There's so many available. A lot of them are free. I use VS Code, but there's plenty available that you can look up and find, and you'll probably want that. Visual Studio is another one. Writer is one people talk about. So there's quite a few that you guys can pick between, but you're going to probably want something that helps you write your code better than a basic text editor, or like the default one that comes with your operating system. So that's a tool you'll probably want if you're going to be doing the development side of things. Okay, I think we've covered. Do you guys have any questions so far? If after we've answered some questions, we can dig into Unity, and I'll show you kind of how I put something together, what it looks like, what the engine looks like, what the interface of the engine's like, the coding part of it, and how it all comes together. But if you have any questions first, please do ask. I'm happy to help you guys. As I mentioned, I do stream daily, so every day I have conversations with others who are either getting into development or have been doing it for a long time, and we have really great conversations. So I'm lucky to have learned from these people as well, and hopefully, if you guys have a question, I can share what I've learned so far on those topics. All right. Do all engines not come with an integrated code editor? I remember Godot has one. Good question. TaxShack, I would say that, I'm not sure. Unity used to come with one, but I don't think it does anymore. So you do need to get one. And some of the ones that I've seen that come with the engine might not be equipped with the tools that can help you learn the language. So that might be worth looking into, even if it comes with one. You might want a little upgrade. I know Python can make AAA games. Well, to make a AAA game, you'll have to be part of a studio. To be part of a studio, you probably need to have the skills to make a game. You need to probably have some games made that you can show off and prove what you know. But the first step to getting down that path is to download a game engine and start making, well, you don't need a game engine, but to start making games of your own and learning, and you can eventually work towards that. Python works. Different companies use different engines. Some of them have custom, some of them use pre-built engines, and they all use different, well, not all, they use different languages. If there's a specific company you want to work for, why not go to their website? When they're in their hiring list, it will tell you some of the things that they would like you to know, and you can start learning those things. I think that's a really direct way to gain the skills you need. Flutter Flame is cool for 2D stuff. I have never used Flutter Flame. Thanks for sharing that. I was looking back around 5 years back. Yeah, things change really quickly. For example, Blender is probably the one that's come the furthest in that time. 5 years ago, Blender was, I still think Blender is not as intuitive as Maya in getting started, but they've really improved the onboarding. There's so many add-ons and tools. It's really powerful. There's so much you can do within it. And what the software used to be 5 years ago may be different today. But again, don't feel intimidated by the choices, just because there's different tools. They're all really great, and you can always switch if you don't like the one you're using. Do you have a set of steps to set up Unity along with VS Code? I don't have specifics, like a tutorial on that, but we can look at that a little closer once we get into things. Yes, Blender 2.8, exactly. Fast the way to go for an open source software. That a lot of people feel that way, and that's I probably want to go with Godot if that is important to you. All right, let's take a look at Unity. I do have a scene open, so we can start sharing the screen, and I'll walk us through what it looks like, basically. There we go. Thank you. All right, so this is an empty Unity project. If you're getting Unity, you're going to get the Unity Hub, which is where you install different versions of Unity. You probably want to get, in fact, let me bring up the Hub so you can see what it looks like. So here we have a list of projects. You can look at your installs, and this shows the different versions. If you could click on Install Editor, it will show you the official versions. LTS means long-term support, so you probably want to get one that has long-term support, meaning that they're no longer changing it, they're no longer upgrading it, or that's good. They've fixed most of the bugs. They are confident that you will come across a few of them, and you can go ahead and work with that. Then there's like the betas available, but it's best, especially when you're learning, to go with an LTS. And you can install the most recent LTS here, and then you can make a new project here, new project. So I've already gone through the setup, because that does take a few minutes for the project to set up. And this is the screen that you are given. There is a lot here, but don't let it intimidate you. Some of these things may not be clear to begin with, but to be honest, don't worry about these menus too much. The biggest thing you're going to want to look at is your hierarchy, your inspector, your project, and your scene view here, okay? So these should be there by default. If they're not, you can find them here. It may take a little bit of finding, but they should be named accordingly. General, you can find hierarchy, inspector. So hierarchy, inspector, project, and scene view. Let's go through what each of those are. The hierarchy here basically says the different elements in this scene, and scenes are kind of like, I don't know how to describe a scene. It's kind of like it's got a bunch of things in it. you will, if you have a city in here, you'll see the city when you play the game. And if you go to a new scene, anything that was in the last one is no longer there. You can transfer it, move between them, but they're kind of in these confined scenes so that you don't have everything in the game all being considered, I guess, in the processing at a point in time. You can keep things together so you're only looking at what you need to look at that point in time. So think of it as like level 1 would be in a scene, level 2 would be in a scene. You might have like your menu system in a scene. Your title screen might be a separate scene. So that's kind of how scenes work. And this is what it looks like when you're within a scene. Over here in your hierarchy, this tells you the different items in the scene. By default, we have a camera and a light. Okay, that's all we got. We'll add some more things in a minute. In our project tab here, we have all of the items that are available. This is like if you think of your file explorer, that's basically all that this is. This is a file explorer. All the files within that folder, your project folder, will be available here. Even if you don't use them in the game at all, you can keep them here, but you probably don't want to keep anything that's not in the game because then it's just going to make your project size bigger. So you don't need it. But anything that's going to be in the game, you can take it from here. So if you have 3D objects, if you have images, if you have sound, that will all be here. And you can bring it into the current scene by bringing it from the assets folder into your hierarchy. The inspector gives us details on the game objects within the scene. So if we click on the main camera, we're now looking at details of that game object. So as you can see, the transform, these are different components, okay? You'll see we have 3 components on this game object. Transform tells us position, rotation, and scale of that object. The camera component has a bunch of different things here. This is a default component from Unity, and we have an audio listener here as well. We can add all different types of components. For example, we could add an audio source so that it will play an audio from this particular game object. You probably don't want to add much to a camera unless you, like maybe you want to add post-processing would be one that you would add to your camera, for example, or you might want to add a cinematic controller to the camera. But you can also make your own custom ones using script. Here's our directional light that has, again, position, rotation, and scale. Plus it has some, has a light component, which has all of these information. So you can change, for example, the color of the light. We don't see much because the light's not hitting anything yet. Any questions so far? Unity or Unreal for beginners? They're both fantastic tools. I would say pick one and go with it. Don't get too hung up on which one's better because it might leave you in indecision, and the longer you wait to learn something, the less time you spend learning. I would say from my perspective, if you're going to choose between them, if you don't have a coding background and you want to learn to code, I would recommend Unity because you're using C# right off the bat, and you don't have to learn the blueprint system. Whereas with Unreal, you're starting with the visual scripting, and then if you want to code, you can use C++. But C++, you have to manage the memory, which is a little bit more complex. So that's done for you automatically with C#. So it really depends. If you are not sure about coding, maybe just go into visual scripting and you can just plug things into each other and it's all like laid out and you can see it visually as it's described, as it sounds. And you can see it all and maybe that will make more sense to you. But if you really are interested in getting into coding, C# is a great place to start, and I do recommend Unity for that. It's totally up to you. Both are great ways to get started, though. Just depends on your learning style, really. You could also spend a day or two going through tutorials for each one and then make a decision. That might help. So yeah, but my biggest advice is to pick one and start learning and not let the choice weigh you down or hold you back. Yeah, thanks, Anthony. These game objects here, that's right. So you can import 3D objects as well. And those can come into your project, which we can do if we have time. So let's start by adding some items to the scene. If you go to your hierarchy, right-click, you can find here that there's 3D game objects, and there's a bunch of different options. Let's pick a cube, and let's make it like it's a surface, a ground. So you can do it. You have the WER keys, which change between transform. E is rotation, and R is scale. So that was just control this information here. So we can make it like 50 by 1 by 50. So it's like a piece of ground. We zoom out. And then let's make it right in the middle of the scene so it's easy to find. That's at 0, 0, 0. And let's call it ground so we know what's what. I left the R there. My mistake. Now we have a ground here. And now when we change our light color, it has more of an effect because it's actually hitting something, right? So the light's hitting something, we get this results. And another thing we can look at is, for example, the materials here. If we add a material to this by right-clicking over on our project, create material, let's call this ground, and we drag that onto the ground here, or you drag it onto this. Now it's added to our game object, and now we can change the color of this or other properties, like we can make it shiny, or we can make it matte, or we can give it emission so it's glowing, which is not hard. It's not as easy to tell because there's not a lot in the scene. So that's kind of what it's like to add a game object in. There's a few basic shapes in Unity, but most of the things you want to add will probably be imported from another software or by somebody who made it. Ooh, shiny. For C++, we have to download it as a plugin, right? I don't know. I'm not sure because I'm used to using C#. I want to learn more about stuff like Decentraland and the Sandbox game. What do you want to know about them? I'm not sure what those were built in, but you can build pretty much any type of game using Unity, and well, that's another thing to look at. If you want to build for mobile, if you want to build for desktop, if you want to build for console, maybe check out if you can use what tools are available for which platforms. I know Unity can build for pretty much anything, so that can be done on a game that you download on your desktop and install it and play it. It could be built to run in a browser. It could be built to run on your phone. It can be built to be ported to consoles, so you can get it from a console, even like the Switch. So depending on what you want to build for, it's worth looking at ways to do it for that particular platform. But you can do a lot of things with Unity and Unreal. So let's look at how code is added. Somebody asked, how do you set up a particular IDE or text editor within Unity? The way to do that is you go over to your preferences, which are under edit, and it brings up this. And under preferences, there's external tools. And here you can see I have Visual Studio Code selected. It shows me the ones that it recognizes here. So I have Visual Studio 2022. I have Visual Studio Community 2022. And I can browse to add a new IDE or text editor if it's not being found by Unity. So you just select it. You may need to restart, but once you do that, when you click on a script, it should open up the default IDE. So let's do that. Let's add a new game object and create empty. I'm going to call this controls. That's what I keep most of my scripts on. And so this is just an empty game object. If you click add component and type out the name of your script, we're going to call it, let's call it change material. This will change the material, and we create and add. So now we have a script added to this game object. So this is one of the building blocks I mentioned, a component. So we can double click on this and start working with it. So this is what it looks like when you open a new script. You'll notice my editor is very fancy. It's see-through. It's got a lot of different extensions to make it look custom. That can be changed however you want yours to be. Let me make the background a little darker since we're looking at this. Here we go. Together. There we go. So we have the namespaces here, which are in by default. You just want to leave these. This is using all of the things that Unity's put together for you, are added, or a chunk of them are added here to help you work with the stuff that they've done for you. And here within our public class, change material, which is what we named the file, you got to make sure that those two match, the name of the file and the text here. This is whatever you put in here is going to happen in the code when it's executed. So we start off with start, and then we have update. So these are here by default. You can remove them. We have comments, as you see, with backslashes. We have void start. We have void update. And then we have brackets, which is where we'll put our code inside of. So this is the class, but within the class, if there's any like instruction, some of you guys are probably already familiar with programming. So this might be, you might be very familiar with this, but for those of you who are new to it, the instructions go inside these functions and between these brackets, and that's where you put your code, and they will happen when that function starts. So with Unity, void start happens when this script starts. So if it's on a game object, when that game object's loaded, the script starts. And update happens automatically every frame as long as that script is present on a game object. So one thing that I like to use is something called debug.log. And that is going to print something out for us. So we're going to say a classic hello world. And that's what it looks like to get something to show up in your consoles. This is not actually going to show up in our game yet, but it will show up in our console so that we know that something's happening when we start the game. So debug.log, and these are in quotes because it's a string, and this is what we're going to print. So now, because this script is on my controls game object, when I start the game, it will print into my console. So the console just kind of spits out information you might want to know, such as debugs like I just showed you. And you start the game by pressing the play button. So here it is. Nothing's happening yet, but we did get a hello world in our console, knowing that our script is linked up, and it's a good place to start working from. It's also a great place to debug is a great way to start adding things into your code to get information if something's not working. So if you are expecting something to happen, let's say you're expecting a value to change in a certain way, you can debug that value to find out what it's currently at different points in the code. There's lots of ways you can use debug creatively to get a better idea of what's going wrong if something comes up. Now, the next thing, I'm going to remove these comments to keep it a little bit, in fact, let's just start from nothing. We're going to make a script where if we press a button, we'll change the color of this sphere. So I just right-click, add sphere. This is going to be right in the middle of the scene. We're going to bring it above the ground, make it nice and big. And what we're going to do is change the color of it. So in our project, we're going to create more materials. Let's create one called, what are two colors that we want to use for this? What two colors shall we switch between in the scripts? Hey, can you tell us about game development in Rust? I wish I could. I haven't used Rust for game development. I haven't used Rust at all, actually. So I'm not really familiar on how you would go about it, but I have heard some interesting things. We do have some people come by the stream who are using Rust for game development, and they're doing some really powerful things with it. Pink and salmon? Purple and pink. Okay, pink and salmon might be too similar. It might not be obvious enough for testing. Purple and pink sounds great. Let's go with those. So let's make purple. Right, purple here, you can see. we can change some properties. Like I'm going to make it nice and non-reflective. So that's what purple looks like. Control D makes a duplication of a object, both in your hierarchy and your scene project here. So we're going to rename this one pink and change the color to a nice bright pink here. So we have this ready to use. Is it possible to zoom in on your Unity interface? I don't think so, but if there's something you want me to explain that you can't see, let me know and I can give you a better idea of what we're looking at. So let's go back to our script. We want to be able to access a few things in our scene. And the way that we do that is by declaring them here. So we're going to say public game object. Actually, so there's different things you can get. You can get the game object, which is like this whole thing, which we just kind of went over, or you can get the component within a game object, and then you can link that up together to your script. So we're going to get the renderer, which is on our sphere here. And on our renderer, this is the thing that changes when we change the material. So you're going to get familiar with this as you go through more tutorials, but the renderer is what you change the material on. So we're going to get the renderer component of the sphere, and we're going to call it sphere. Oh, I've got some autocomplete on there. So now we'll be able to get the sphere. I'll show you before we continue. So in our controls is where our change material script is. And now that it's public and it's declared, it says sphere, and it says that it's looking for a renderer, but there's none there. So we can just grab this sphere and drag it in here because it has a renderer on it. Now we have those linked up. So now we know we can control this through that. And then we continue on. We're going to also add public material, let's say purple, and a comma will give us two options, pink. And because they're public, they will show up in the inspector here. So now we have two more things, looking for two materials, both of which are not filled in here. We're going to add pink to the pink one and purple to the purple one. So now we can grab these different things from our project folder or from our hierarchy during the game. Now, we're going to use the update function, and that's the one I mentioned earlier that happens every frame. So every, less than a second when the game refreshes, it checks our it checks our update function. So that looks like this, void update, which we saw earlier. And basically it's saying that it's not going to return anything. So you can make functions that will give back a value, but a lot of the time, depending how you're working, especially when you're starting off, you're going to start with void because these functions aren't going to give anything back. They're going to do their thing. And within the code is where things happen. So you don't need to give anything back, but you can start getting more creative with how you use your functions. And if we have any parameters that we want to change, would go in these brackets. We don't have any. We just have a nice simple void update. And within that, we're going to say if, and in brackets, we're going to say input dot get key down, key code, and we're going to use the letter O. So this is an if statement. Some of you who are familiar with programming already will be familiar with this from other languages or C# itself. And input is from Unity, get key down is from Unity, and key code is how we distinguish which key is going to be pressed. And basically, whenever something's pressed, it will run. Whatever happens inside these brackets will be run when we press the O because it's continuously checking for it. So to give you a quick idea, read through the debug log again. I'll say test. We save this, let it compile. Then we can press play. And if we have our console open here, every time I press the O button, you're seeing that it's doing 2 because it's stacking. But if we don't collapse it, every time I press O in the game, it adds a debug because it's waiting for something to happen during every frame. And when we press O, the thing happens. Now it's testing. We're going to add another variable here. It's going to be a bool. And we're going to say is purple. And we're going to say true. So we're starting off, this is purple set to true. Now what we're going to do is switch between them. So we're going to do another if statement within here. If is purple. So you can say equals true. But if you want to be a little fancier, you can just remove this because is purple means is equivalent to saying equals true. So we can just say if is purple. And then we say we want to set it to be pink. So sphere dot material equals pink. And we're going to change this to be true. Now that, wait, sorry. Yeah, if it is purple, so it's currently purple, and now we're setting it to pink, we want is purple to now equal false because it's not pink, purple anymore. And we're going to do an else clause where this is if it is purple, and else means, because it's a bool, not purple, meaning it's going to be pink in this situation. We're going to copy this over, and we're going to set this back to purple. And then we're going to set is purple to true. Now it's purple again. And that's pretty much it. So now we can click start, let that compile. And if I press O, switches it to pink, switches it back to purple. And you can see the very basics of how your code can be impacting the scene right off the bat. So that's the basics of it. We have less than 10 minutes. Do you guys have any more questions so far? If not, I'll quickly show you what it's like to create something in 3D and bring it in. I don't see anything, so let's go for it. We're going to open up Maya because that's what I use. But like I said, Blender works great, and it's free if you want to start with the open source tools. And I think you can try Maya if you don't like Blender. And if then you can choose to do like the monthly subscriptions, like a lot of software. But you know, there's free ways to do game development. So I don't want anyone to feel intimidated by the a cost to it. It's the cool thing about it. It's so much free tools. It's just loading. Give it a second. Blender for the win. A lot of people really like Blender. Okay. So this is what Maya looks like. This one has an even more intimidating interface, but you don't have to know all of it to get started with it. So I'm going to just go with it. I won't explain everything I'm doing because there's a lot to take in, but I'll just show you what it looks like. I'll explain what I'm doing, but you know, these things you start to get to know as you do the tutorials. So for example, I'm trying to think of a simple object. Let's make a top hat. Okay, so we do a sphere like this. I don't know why I thought of a top hat for first object. I guess it's nice and simple to make, but without getting too complex. We have a top hat, and we want to see what it's like to bring it into the game. I'm just going to make like the edges smooth. There's lots of little things in here that you start to get used to as you do more 3D, like beveling. And it's really fun, honestly. Like you get into a rhythm and it takes almost no time to do these things. The more you get used to it, the faster you are. You can even do like a little more wonky style. Make it like kind of Tim Burton-esque. We got kind of like a top hat. Now what we do is we just go export selection. I'm going to export onto my desktop top hat. And what I can do now is go over to my file explorer here, and I can just like drag it from my desktop into here. It's an FBX, it's a file format. So when I'm exporting it, it's just like I choose here, FBX, and now I just drag that FBX into Unity, and here it is in my assets folder. So it's ready to go. So now I can take this and just drag it into here. I'm using a different size in Maya, so you can convert units, uncheck that, apply. Now it's not so tiny. And we can start moving it around. We can give it materials. We could even replace the sphere to be the top hat, since that also has a renderer. And now our script can work on, oh, we don't see it from this view. Let's just move it over. Now we can just work on, you can switch things around like this. You can see that your code that you make can be applied to all different game objects, different situations, and you can make reusable code that you use on all different things. And you can start to become really creative in making a nice and really efficient game. When you start off, just get it working and learn the basics. But as you get more into it, you can become really good. There's always room to improve. It's constant learning and fun. And I like that there's constant learning, because with the constant learning, you're growing and you're doing new things and you're getting new tools on your tool belt. So it just kind of gets more fun and you feel like more powerful with it as you grow. All right, so that's it for the demo. Do you guys have any last questions before we wrap up? No, that is not Blender. Actually, I can show you Blender. I do have it as well. I use it sometimes. We've got a couple minutes, so we'll do a quick look at Blender, since I think that tends to be the tool to start off with 3D. So as you can see, it's very similar. You can create objects, add a sphere. You can give it some more geometry. And the thing I like to do in Blender is sculpt. So this is a different way of doing art. You can like draw right on there. You can do like a face, really weird face, alien. But there are some steps between these, because if you sculpt, it's usually high resolution. It's not game ready. You then need to make a low poly version to bring into your game. So while it's fun to do this for art, the sculpting stuff, there are some steps between sculpting before you want to bring it into Unity, or you're going to end up with a file that's so big, your game is going to be not performant. It's going to be lagging and skipping. So you want to stick to low poly objects to start. That's one creepy face. Hey, I did it in 2 seconds, okay? What's the Susie? Oh, the monkey. You guys with your Blender and Susie. Where is Susie? Let's see. Monkey. Here's Susie. Let's get Susie smooth shaded. Wow, there's Susie. Susie the monkey. Neat monkey. Well, there you go, guys. If you guys do have any questions on game development, again, you guys are welcome to join the stream at any time. I'm usually working on my game, but I'm happy to help you guys if you have questions. If you guys want to share your work at the end of the stream, we look at that as well. So feel free to come by to ask questions there if you think of something once you get started on this. The monkey? You don't like the monkey? Thanks, guys, for joining today. Hope that you learned something and that you've been inspired to try out some game development stuff. And I guess that is where we can say goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We got one question. What do you think about the future of game dev in the new metaverse thing? There's a lot of people talking about, oh, hey. Hello, Rosendo. Talking about metaverse. I think games are going to be becoming more and more interesting. There's so much to explore with games. Like, if you think about movies, we only have so many types of games out there. Like, where's the sitcom of games? Where's like the game show of games? I feel like there's so many avenues to explore with games, and you can do so much more interactive stuff that the sky's the limit. We can only get more interesting and exciting games like the metaverse and stuff like that. We'll see how that goes.
Awesome. All right. I mean, do you want to answer a couple of more questions or?
Sure. Is there more in chat?
Here's one more.
What do you think about the new insane graphics in Unreal Engine? Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So that was what I mentioned earlier with how it's actually removing steps in the process, which is so exciting. To give you an idea, when I did that little creepy smiley face, that's what you do with sculpting. And like I mentioned, that there's so much geometry in that because it's so detailed that bringing into a game would slow it down so bad you can't use it. So you have to make a low version of it. But with the new Unreal Engine, you don't have to do that. They found a technology that you can have as complex objects as you want. So it removes a huge step in the process and allows people to be more creative and not have to learn new things or do those tasks. So it's pretty exciting. I also, the metaface, the character creators in Unreal are also really, really cool.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think I speak for everyone here, and when I say that, it was extremely impressive to see you do what you do with Unity and just with Maya and a little bit of Blender as well. Super impressed. You made it look very easy. Thank you so much for joining us today and for showing us what you can do and what's possible with video game development. As I mentioned before, for anyone that wants to keep up with Lana, her Twitch channel is right there across the ticker on the bottom. And you could also watch this video later on Twitch or YouTube. And all of those links will be made available to you via the Discord channel. So thanks so much once again, Lana, for joining us. It was a pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on the stream. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye, y'all.